Hello, and welcome back to Bitwig. Today, let's build a compressor. Let's remember what a compressor is first, and then get into the reasons why this is our task for today. Now, a compressor, and we have Compressor Plus, the new device loaded here as a nice example. A compressor is a dynamics device, meaning it is a processor that alters the dynamic range of a signal, the amplitude range. Particularly, this word compression is saying we're going to reduce the dynamic range from the top, generally, so that we can then take the entire signal with a smaller dynamic range and make the entire signal louder. This idea of makeup gain or output gain or whatnot. Now, the way this is achieved is there's usually at least 4 common parameters, starting with a threshold and ratio pair, which is saying when the signal goes above a certain threshold, compression will now be engaged. Gain reduction will be engaged. How much will it reduce the gain of the signal? Well, by the set ratio parameter. So we can hear it backing off already. Now, this isn't just some fixed volume. This is still taking into account the level of the signal coming in and proportionally attenuating that. So if we're much lower, we're still getting the same ratio, just spread over a much larger range with a different effect. Additionally, there's this idea of attack and release to say how quickly does the compression, the gain reduction, begin. And if I bring attack way down, you will see the gain reduction meters start jumping much longer distances and much quicker. So how quickly does gain reduction begin? And when we fall back below the threshold, how quickly is it released? So if we make this slow, it's going to stay in the compression longer. And if we pull it back down, well, it will exit more quickly. Those are some of the common parameters. Now, you tend to end up with compressors that are fairly fulsome, like Compressor Plus, where there are plenty of options, because compression is a common technique with more than a single purpose. There's plenty of reasons you might want to compress a signal. So trying to take it in different directions makes sense. And Compressor Plus is making a specific effort to cover most of the things you might want to do with a compressor, which is cool, and it's specialized. Now, the reason we're bringing this up today is we were talking about signal functions, thinking about how connections work and what are the actual functions of signals. We only came up with 3. There are audio signals, which reach speakers or headphones, an output bus basically that can turn into waves in the air. There are control signals that end up manipulating a parameter to affect a device or module. And then there are timing signals, which basically start or synchronize a function by telling it when to begin. A compressor is the most common device that uses its one incoming signal. I'm not talking about sidechain for now. It's one incoming signal to do all 3 of these things. The signal coming in is the audio that's being processed. The signal coming in is the timing signal based on this threshold saying, when does this engage and release? Again, it's starting when it crosses, and it's starting when it falls back down to trigger the release portion. And it's also a control signal because it is proportional and it is determining, based on the incoming signal, what the gain change will be. So in the simplest sense, this is the most basic device or the most common device that covers all 3 of our cases. So it's a good one to look at today and to start playing around. Now, compression is a tricky and dark art. So let's take a brief side tour and go to a different dynamics device, the simple gate device, which basically says I have a signal, and when I have a threshold, Usually this would be a noise gate, but right now I feel like I'm a DMC champion. When the signal is below the threshold, it says, oh, it's time to get rid of it. Now there is a depth parameter, but we're just going to leave it all the way down. Let's pull it down as far as possible towards silence. And again, there is an attack and release to say how quickly do we enter and how quickly do we return from this gain reduction. So it's simpler in a way, and the threshold is on the lower side. So maybe we can learn a couple lessons by starting to build this. And yes, we will be in effects grid today. So in the logic category are comparators, because again, we have this threshold behavior, which means above a certain point, we'll go one way, below a certain point, go a different way. So comparators might be the sort of thing that we want. If we're looking for what is below, then perhaps less than or equal to is the type of device we might want. So if we go ahead and specify the value of a signal coming in, we already see this signal flickering up and down quite a bit. Now, there are reasons. If we were to look at this audio signal, it's about what we would expect. It will be moving up and down around 0 quite a bit. So the fact that it is positive and negative, and that's the nature of moving a membrane in a speaker or headphone to create pressure changes back and forth, this isn't going to cut it because half of our signal is going to end up in the wrong place. It means we want to do, instead of checking the instantaneous, the immediate amplitude level, we want to go a little bit deeper down the amplitude chain. We want to think about averaged amplitude, which is really what we're seeing most of the time with VU meters or other things. We're seeing the position, not the constant moving back and forth of the sine wave. So it's taking the value over time. Now, over in the envelope category, we do have our normal envelope generators, which might be useful in a moment. But for now, I think the follower RF, the envelope follower with the rise and fall parameters, might be the sort of thing that we want. Because in this scope right now, we're just seeing the immediate instantaneous level. Now, the traditional definition, the acoustics definition of envelope, is the amplitude curve of any signal over time. So if we run this in, this is a processor, we have a signal input port, and suddenly we're getting a pretty slewed value, which is trying to approximate the curve, the envelope of the signal that's coming in. Now, this is something that we can do some better math with. So let's go ahead, let's average that value, and let's take a look at that instead of the immediate instantaneous amplitude. That's an audio rate modulation. That's not what we're trying to do here. We just want the level over time. And then we can get something that looks a bit better in general. I think we might just have it backwards is the only thing. So we started with saying if it's less than or equal to. So now if it's in the low side of the signal level, we'll get a positive signal. That's probably backwards because we only want signal when it's on the high side. So what would probably make this easier is just to swap this out with a greater than or equal to. So now, just when we have the strong enough signals, does something actually pass through? Now, we've got this nice logic signal, this timing signal. Now we have to do something with it in the audio domain. And again, with a logic signal like that, that's saying turn something on, turn something off. By the way, we had, what do we have over here? Attack and release parameters. Well, I think maybe the AR envelope might be exactly what we want. really brief sidebar. Envelope generators are generators. Remember, back to this distinction, there are generator modules, processors, and terminals, and there are definitely some hybrids. The standard envelopes we see most of the time now are hybrids. An envelope generator has a gate input or a trigger input for when it should enunciate, and it has an output for the envelope signal itself. But there's no signal input on an envelope generator. So this is a hybrid module. This is actually a coupled VCA, a scaler that's there under the control of the envelope. So that just to work in line, you can say, I want to multiply this signal by the envelope that's coming in. And then that's what we start getting. So if we take this, I disabled the precord already, and now I've connected the signal. It's not terrible. The only other thing that might be worth thinking about here is the idea that instead of picking an absolute value for volume, I might want to use decibels. So let's just take a brief detour for one moment and take a look. If we run this signal straight to the output, and I do, well, let's get rid of the envelope. If I run this through straight to the output, and in the footer I have all these options, I do have shift to add an attenuator. Now, this is exactly similar to the value module. In fact, let's just replace this with a multiply and use that exact value signal that I had. And we can go ahead and look at this signal as it comes in. So as I go to turn this volume down, I don't feel like I'm making all that much change. And then the very bottom 15% of the knob is doing most of the work. And I just don't really have control in the right place. Now, if I right click on value, this is one of these constant type modules. There's another one called level, which happens to be beside it in the level category, which lets me say, well, instead of working in just percentage and raw signal values, maybe what I want to do is work in decibels. Which feels a bit more even. And if we were even looking at this scope in the log domain, we'd kind of see that we have a lot of range, a bit more range in the bottom for getting those quiet signals to come in and smoothly move up. And if I went back again to the value, the raw percentage module, now I'm staying really high in the decibel representation of the world. It doesn't feel very balanced. Oh, and we're done. Oh, yeah. It just doesn't feel very balanced for what we want to do. So if we're talking about dynamics processing, decibels are on a curve, and it's a curve that is much more natural to our ears and how our ears hear and perceive sound. So that might be a good place to start. So I'm going to leave this as a decibel value for now. I'm going to go back to what we had where the envelope is kicking in to stay open because we're saying when it's greater than. That's a timing signal, stay open. Remember, this is a timing input. So this entire chain of processing the audio through an envelope follower and then doing a math comparison to it and then making it in here. That's where the function is defined. We finally have a functional input. Everything else is a signal input, just saying we're doing an operation. We're passing the signal through. Now it's timing. Now we've decided that this thing will start and stop. And we should probably see that again. Oh, I stayed in value. Let's go back to level. There we go. It just feels a bit better in a human way. Charmingly, I also hear the stereo nature of the grid even for these control signals, which is nice. So let's do something kind of short and quick. So we're detecting the signal. We're giving it a fade in of about 40 milliseconds, and then a fade out that's okay for when it's returning. The signal is coming back in. We can put it about the same. Now, one last little trick in this example, one idea that could work in any domain of audio processing. We do have some fun tricks. If I go ahead and say, I really want an idea of look ahead. I want the idea that this processing is actually being applied a moment after it's already been analyzed, so that it can happen within the signal frame in a different way. What I could do is say, do the analysis, figure out when to duck based on the signal coming in, and then maybe I just want to delay the signal itself by a slight moment. So what, I had about a 40 millisecond fade. So if I make this about 40 milliseconds, then we're now going to be landing at the end of the fade so that we are landing exactly on the thing that might have triggered it. And it's just a slightly different effect. Now, I know, it's 39.7 milliseconds late. That seems like a problem. Well, being the DAW has certain advantages. I will go for the time shift utility device, which, yes, lets you make signals later. But we can also make signals earlier. Now, you don't hear it right now, but if I was in the context of a session and I had a bunch of other tracks, all those other tracks are suddenly being delayed by a moment, so that this processing could happen and stay in real time and stay at the moment that you want it. I've put a delay in one place, I've corrected it after, and everything else can stay balanced. So a couple nice tricks in there. And we're seeing a portion of what we were thinking about. We were thinking about taking a signal coming in as audio and also using that signal, in this case, as timing at least. Now, the compressor example is more complicated because it's also using it as a control signal. It's also deciding in a slightly complicated way. It's trying to multiply the level and really becomes a root. It's factoring it up and saying, oh, well, how much are we scaling it down based on its current position? And that starts making the math and working with it a little bit complicated. So I would like to build this in a different way, a way that you might expect a bit in DSP programming land. So we're going to the deep end of the pool a little bit. We looked at decibels, we looked in the nature of loudness, and now we've got another blank patch here. It's time to build a compressor. We could start with some of the simplest things just so that we have the controls. It had a pre-gain and a makeup post-gain on the other one. So in this case, I could go to level. I could say maybe gain dB, which just gives me a plus minus 24 decibel range of control. That doesn't seem terrible. So should we go ahead and name these? Input gain and makeup. Fine. That seems like a good idea. The drums can wait for a moment. Now, what we do want to do definitely is analyze the signal coming in and the envelope follower with the rise and fall, which are basically the attack and release times we had. That does seem like a good place to continue. So let's go ahead and put that in here. We see the signal, and with this averaging, we do have these controls, a lot like the compressor would. And additionally, like some compressors do, Compressor Plus does this more in character modes and other timing ways, because there's so many kinds of timing inside of a compressor, it gets nasty. But here, you do have a control, the idea of dealing with average RMS times, which are a bit smoother and slower, or peak, which is a bit more instantaneous, responsive, punchy. So we've kind of covered all that to begin with. And then, yes, we probably want to start thinking about a threshold and how we're going to do that. So back in the level category, again, we do have this level object, which is just letting us set in decibels something useful. So let's go ahead and call that threshold. Now, this is where it's going to get fun. Have you ever considered working in the log domain instead of the linear domain? Good. I'm glad that you've thought about that. Very brief demonstration. We're not even here to listen to signal. I'm just going to take an LFO or two. And I'm going to have a couple different signals coming at a couple different rates. And I'm going to linearly, I do like that fast movement. I am going to linearly do multiplication with them. Again, I've got my footer stuff, merge with multiply, control shift, okay. And now I've multiplied a couple signals, and they're working. Maybe we just want to sync them up a little better. Okay. Good enough. Yeah. Let's break our math a little, make it funny. There we go. So multiplication is good and fine. It will work. Switching into other domains can make it a little bit tricky. Depending on the signals that we have, there's a lot of reasons that log could be handy. Now, what do I mean by log? Let's duplicate this. We had this working in the linear domain, but we have these strange signals, and I think I know the types of signals we want to end up with. We want to end up with some kind of gain reduction like we were seeing in the meter that's just pulling down a little bit over time. And getting into a place where we can have a signal like that is going to be more convenient if we can think differently. So we are going to the math category, and yes, we are going to the very end of the math category, where we have this log module, which has a few different flavors. So what I can do now is say, well, I'm going to convert this signal to a totally different domain, and I'm going to convert the other signal coming in again to a totally different domain using Euler's number. And then, well, that doesn't look correct at all for two reasons. One, after we end up doing all this math, we have to undo it. We have to bring it back to the linear domain with the exponent module. to say, well, we went to the log of e, and now we need to go to the exponent of that. Now, why does all this look totally weird? Because addition in the log domain will give us the equivalent of multiplication in the linear domain. And it has several other nice benefits, including that it's on a curve, kind of like we heard with decibels before, where we have a better range to begin with. Decibels is a log domain. And also, you see, when I switch polarities here, it also has a kind of naturally correcting mechanism in some cases. If we want to either get rid of one side of the equation, we can work with that kind of easily, one side of the polarities. Or if we want to bend signals from 0 and 1 in those ranges, we might end up there a lot more cleanly. And there's other bonuses. So basically, these are roots. Addition becomes multiplication, and multiplication becomes exponents, because that's what logs are. And that is some of what we're going to want to do in the compressor. So like in our example a minute ago, this is the point where we want to convert both of our incoming signals to this log domain. So both the average signal coming in as well as the threshold should now be in this other domain, because something like subtraction can be done and easily manipulated instead of doing a division process and other weird things. So now I start getting a signal that is only above the threshold, and above the threshold it's only going from 0 to 1. So this inherent threshold behavior is now built in to a little bit of simple math. If I go ahead and take this and say, well, I just want to clean things up now. I've landed in a good place. I just don't want the things below 0. There's a few ways I could do that. I could say, oh, if it's greater than 0, then we multiply the output times that yes-no signal and we get it. Well, let's be more clever than that. Remember, we do have this min-max module, which says I have 2 signals coming in, and it will give me the maximum of one of them, or the maximum of the 2 and the minimum of the 2. And remember, a favorite trick, I didn't connect the second signal. I've got a 0 already. If I select this module now, out of the maximum output, I am seeing just the things that were above 0, because we're comparing everything to 0 and just saying if it's above 0, go ahead and pass it through the maximum output. So that's a pretty good place to be. Now, the part that was tricky here with the compressor compared to the gate is the idea of ratio. That now, when things are above the threshold and we have a nice signal just showing us when things are above, you know what? We should see this. That would make everything easier. I'd like to see the average signal, and I would like to see the gain reduction signal. So the only problem with my gain reduction signal is it's on the wrong side right now. It would be a little bit nicer. The gain reduction needs to pull everything down. So that's easy enough to correct. We've got a unipolar positive signal coming through. If we go to the math category at the beginning, we have the nice simple invert module to say, well, invert is turned on, flip it around. Now this is starting to look like a graph that we're familiar with and that we can look at comfortably and then manipulate. So now that we're inverting this and it's facing in the right direction, what we now need to do is figure out a way to implement ratio. And again, as alluded a minute ago, If I multiply in the log, inside of the log domain, I'm basically doing a power. I'm basically doing an exponent. And that's the tricky math that's going to get really simple here. Because all I need now, again, same as these gain devices I had at the end, I'll just use the attenuator instead. If this is at 100%, then I'm fully opening the ratio, and if it's less, then my reduction is occurring less. Now, none of this is taking effect yet because we haven't made it back to the audio domain. So let's go ahead and make it back to the audio domain. I can go ahead and now say, we converted into log, we have log of E, now we need the power to come back out and make it to the linear side. If we go back to math, same as before, and say now this needs to end up on the power to give me something linear, and I look at that signal, that looks like something that is holding really steady at the top and then has gain reduction coming down, that it's starting at 100% and pulling down a little bit, which, since I'm back in the linear domain, that looks perfectly to say, hey, guess what? This is probably my gain reduction signal. So if we came over here, that is our ratio. Less ratio, less audible effect. It's not pulling as hard when it goes above the threshold. Oh, someone said threshold? Yes. Lower the threshold so it happens more often. Now, we definitely have makeup gain and all the rest. You could definitely imagine a self-correcting circuit of, oh, I know the threshold, oh, I know the ratio, therefore I should boost everything by this much. Okay, you can go ahead and do that. But just to examine a couple things that are left over here, we have attack, we have release, we have threshold, we have ratio, and more than all that, and a little bit interesting, now we have the opportunity to try different things. We could go ahead and try with this, the log and root devices, they have different bases that you could operate in, which all have slightly different curves, which you could investigate and see if some things feel better than others. Additionally, now that we've got simple, clean signal, this max out here is just going from 0 up towards 1, probably a little bit beyond. How about some simple processing? How about a way to now tweak the process because I'm here and I'm not in someone else's compressor where the hood is closed and I can't get to the engine. So let's go ahead to the filter and grab the simple low-pass filter device. It's rattling a bit more. It's smoothing things out quite a bit. So again, totally uncompressed signal. Finally, is the goal here to try and make the absolute best compressor in the world? That might be what you're after, but there's other good reasons to try to recreate something that you know. One is, instead of making the best tool in the world, to sharpen your mind and help you understand this process better. Is that the academic argument? Yes, it is. But there is value in that. Another reason might be that you imagine the interface totally differently. You do want to make the two knobs that make sense and are balanced all around. Yeah, you could use modulators, macros, do that as well. But how about the idea that I can do something unexpected? and unique. The whole idea with compressor is that it is this thresholding device that says, hey, above a certain point, we can do certain things, or below a certain point, we can do certain things. There's a lot of modes in Compressor Plus. So maybe what we should do is examine, sorry, I have to have the drums running to find the signal that we want. We can examine where some of this signal is coming through and say, okay, well, post filter, because the filter is doing something nice. Once, or even here, once we get to the max output, maybe just in the quietest parts of the signal, we would like it to engage some other kind of process. So again, we have this here. That's the signal we're interested in. Let's go for the quietest parts. Let's say, the logic category. Let's say less than or equal to. So if the signal coming out of there is less than or equal to, and we're already flashing up and down with 0, so we are definitely in an interesting range because we are in log space. So everything's going to be a little different. Maybe over in the math category, this strange but helpful constant device that lets us pick a very specific value. Okay. So maybe only things that are coming down quite low, we could engage some function. Do I want to make my own unique audio processor in here after I've already spent a little bit of time building a compressor? No, I don't. Don't forget, there's good reasons that we're in the grid. What if this was a modulator out? And that's moving a little bit quickly. So I've got this signal, it's transitioning on when we go low. So the low part's fine, it's transitioning on. Maybe what I want to do is go back to the envelope category and slow it down. Say when it's sloping up, when we are transitioning upwards, let's give it a little bit of a ramp, if possible. Okay. Now, what do we want to do? Well, I do have a post effects chain here. I could find some other device, maybe this new distortion that we've got. Let's move this out for a second and just hear it. Interesting, a couple interesting choices. So let's put over in the post effects chain and turn its mix all the way down. So now nothing is happening. And it's just waiting for any modulator signal that I can create to say when something should happen. Maybe that's a little too far. But we could definitely add some interesting coloring there. And then maybe just one more. We could take the signal from the low pass, which is pushing upwards. Let's just duplicate this idea. But now we want to say only when it is greater than. That's a very big number. Only when it is greater than, let's see, when we get some true. Yeah, why not? Now, what do we want to trigger? Well, we had those new EQs. Maybe sculpt and the friendly bass tricks over here. that is almost certainly going to be too much. Which is why chain is always the hero. I only want a certain amount of this. So let's balance the wet gain, pull the mix down, and then just get a little bit of tube coloring at certain times. Yeah, there's plenty of reasons you might want to build something that's already known, that you already have a device you like better for. That's totally fine. Now we can change the order. Now, maybe instead of low pass, what we really want to try is a different kind of signal processing. Let's just try a slight little bend. Or maybe have it pinch in the middle instead. Even with these turned off. There are plenty of ways to try out new ideas and find something interesting along the way. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.